When I was 5 years old, I was bitten by a tick, and it led to a series of strange and seemingly unrelated symptoms. Last week, I told you my whole health story, from the tick bite when I was 5 to infertility to strange autoimmune disease and hormone imbalance problems. And then I told you how I got well. And so many of you reached out and you said, we need specifics. We want to know the exact protocol you did. Many of you are struggling with similar symptoms, whether it be from Lyme or something else. And so today, I want to dive into that with you, and I want to get real specific and share the protocol I followed. And to make this even simpler for you, I have written it all down. So you can download my protocol, my whole health story, all the info about Lyme, including a symptom checker to see if you even might be a candidate to get tested for Lyme. This is all linked in my caption, and it's completely free. I made this to help you, and so I want you to take advantage of it. So grab that, and let's dive into the story. So for me, Lyme disease began when I was just a little girl, but I had no idea until over 30 years later. When I was 5, I was bitten by a tick. I had a bullseye rash. I got sick, but we had no idea that it was Lyme disease. In fact, back then in the 80s, doctors tended to lean more towards spider bites for bullseye rashes, and so they guessed that's what it was, and we moved on. You know, I got better. I wasn't sick forever, and it went away. I got better. It wasn't sick forever, and it seemed like the illness went away. But as you know from my story last week, it truly didn't. And I struggled for years with symptoms, got diagnosed with some strange things: lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Cushing's syndrome, PCOS, endometriosis. I could go on and on. And each diagnosis would bring new prescriptions, but they didn't bring any help. And as I treated my symptoms, I just kept getting sicker. So a few years ago, in search of answers, I turned to a holistic path. And I told you guys last week about how I went and had that bioenergetics scan, and it showed Borrelia, the bacteria that is responsible for Lyme disease. And it turned out that that little tick bite when I was a little girl had been wreaking havoc in my body for decades. And that's what Lyme does. So if you are diagnosed with Lyme, what should you do? How do you treat it? So first of all, we have to consider that Lyme can be broken down really into two categories. You have Lyme disease immediately after a tick bite. This is what I would call emergency Lyme treatment. In traditional Western medicine, a doctor will treat an immediate tick bite with an antibiotic. But if you don't treat it immediately, the problem is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease is called Borrelia. And if you look at Borrelia under a microscope, it's actually shaped like a corkscrew. It twists around. And what science shows us is that bacteria can burrow deep in the cells, and it can even hide. So if you're attacking it with antibiotics, sometimes it will get it if you do it immediately, but other times that Lyme bacteria will burrow down deep where it evades the antibiotics, and then you'll feel better for a little while, and then a few weeks or a few months or a few years later, those symptoms reemerge and the Lyme is still there. And so in that case, we have what's known as chronic Lyme, and that was my story. It was Lyme disease that wasn't treated at the time of the tick bite, and now it has spread and caused all kinds of systemic problems in the body. So that's what I want to address today. The protocol that I'm going to share with you is for chronic Lyme. And truthfully, even if you're not sure Lyme is the culprit, a lot of this protocol can be followed and be helpful for any kind of chronic illness. If you're dealing with fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, any sort of like chronic pain that you just can't get a handle on, start with this protocol. So we're going to start with phase 1, and phase 1 is always detox. Before our body can heal, we've got to get rid of the things that are keeping it sick. And so when I think about detox, I tend to look at a few main things. First, we want to detox parasites. In other countries, people do parasite cleanses very regularly. But here in the United States, I made it all the way to my late 30s and no one had ever suggested to me to do a parasite cleanse. So that was the first step I took. I did a complete parasite cleanse. And then the second thing I wanted to detox was mold and heavy metals. Now, parasites actually hold heavy metals. So sometimes when you do a parasite cleanse, you'll actually wipe out the heavy metals at the very same time. And that was the case for me. Now, I used the bioenergetic scan as my testing. And so after the parasite cleanse, I went back and I had another scan to get a new baseline, make sure all the parasites were gone, and to check the heavy metals. We also looked for mold. In my case, I didn't have any mold exposure to treat, so we didn't have to do anything with that. But if I would have reached for a homeopathic tincture to treat the mold. So we detoxed parasites, heavy metals, and molds. Then we've got to look at environmental things. What are the things that you're putting on your body? What kind of products? Skincare. We're talking detergents. We're talking makeup and beauty products. You got to think about all of those things. If you're putting things on your body or on your skin that can absorb, that are hormone disruptors, you're keeping yourself sick. And if you're trying to move your body into a healing state, we got to get rid of that stuff. So I really cleaned up my beauty products. Then we move to food. And this might be the hardest part of all. So with the bioenergetic scan, I also had a test for food intolerances. Not necessarily food allergies, but just intolerances. And you can do this with an IgG blood test. Any naturopath can order that for you, or like a functional health practitioner, an integrative health practitioner, but an IgG blood test will show your food sensitivities. Now, if it comes back and you have like 25 foods you're sensitive to, chances are you're not actually sensitive to that many foods, but you may have leaky gut. And that's a whole other wormhole you can dive down and research. But if it's just a handful of foods that are causing problems, we want to remove those foods from our diet completely. And typically, it's because those foods are going to cause inflammation, and the body cannot heal while it is in an active state of inflammation. So for me personally, that looked like removing gluten, dairy, sugar, and caffeine. Those were the big four. And so gluten and dairy showed on my food intolerance test, so we removed both of those. And then sugar, I know is inflammatory, so I got rid of the sugar. And then caffeine, I know this is a hard one, you guys. We love our coffee, but caffeine can be really taxing on your adrenal glands, which manage your stress response. And so if you're trying to bring inflammation down and move your body to a healing state, we got to get rid of anything that's going to jazz it up and make it more inflamed, and caffeine is not a friend in this situation. It's also not good to use caffeine while you do homeopathic remedies, and as I'll explain in a minute, homeopathy was part of what I used, so the caffeine had to go. So gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, caffeine-free, I promise it's not that bad. Ultimately, what that means is you're going to eat real food and you're going to eat real clean. So that means you're going to be eating like lean meats, fish, all the veggies you want, all the fruits you want, and you're just going to limit inflammatory things like grains. And this made almost an immediate difference for me. Within 2 weeks of doing the parasite cleanse and just changing my diet, I noticed extreme changes. Now, if you remember, joint pain was my #1 symptom of Lyme disease. I was having like crippling arthritis pain in my hands, my feet, my hips, my shoulders, my knees. And the very first thing I noticed is my hands were able to move better. And it was in the mornings. Morning pain was always worst for me. And about 2 weeks into the new diet and into the parasite cleanse, I woke up one morning and I could move my hands. And they didn't feel stiff, and like the pain just was gone. And that hadn't happened in years. Like it had been years since I had been able to clench my hands without just this pain that would like bring a tear to my eyes. It had been to the point where I couldn't do buttons on a shirt. I couldn't open a jar. I mean, it was affecting my life. Josh was having to be my hands, literally. And so that was hugely hope-giving. That was the first sign that I was on the right track. So I did this detox process for the first 2 months. For 60 days, I focused on detox, cleaning up my diet, getting rid of caffeine, getting rid of parasites and heavy metals. And then after 60 days, I moved into attacking the Lyme disease. And so what I chose to do was what my bioenergetics practitioner suggested to me, and I used a product called Bio. Now, Bio makes homeopathics, and they make a kit specifically for Lyme disease. It's called their Boba kit, B-O-B-A. And so you have to get this through a practitioner, but I have all the information linked in the caption for you so you can read about this, learn about it, find a practitioner who could get it for you. And you take this kit, you take a little vial every 3 days, okay? And most people only need to do 3 months of this protocol, and it will completely rid your body of that Borrelia bacteria. But I had had Borrelia for over 30 years, okay? Like, Lyme disease had made me real sick. And I did 3 months, and I still had Lyme disease. I did 3 more months, and I went and got a bioenergetic scan at the 6-month mark. I still had Lyme disease. I did 3 more months, went at the 9-month mark, got another scan, still had Lyme disease. Now, as this was progressing, things are getting better, okay? By 9 months in, I want you to know I have lost about 70 pounds. My joints are mobile again. The pain is lessening. But I also had some really uncomfortable detox symptoms along the way. Like, this was not an easy journey, but it was a worthwhile one because the good news is coming next. So at the 11-month mark, once we hit 9 months, my practitioner was like, you're going to come in every month, and we're going to watch this closely because you've got to be close to getting rid of this. He had never had somebody take this long to get past the Borrelia bacteria. So at 10 months I go, and for the first time we see a change. My skin looks better. And so he's like, let's do 1 more month. The Lyme was still there, but it was looking better. And I think if I had given up after 9 months, like feeling like this is just not working, I'm going to give up, I would be so sick right now. But I kept going. I dug in. I was this far in. I was going to see it through. Month 11, I go in. This was in December. It was right before Christmas. And all I wanted for Christmas was to not have Lyme disease. And I was feeling better. Like, I was really hopeful. I was like, maybe I'll get good news this time. So on the 11-month scan, I go in and he checks me, and there is no Borrelia anywhere in my body. The Lyme is gone. Now, this is a miracle, and it is like the Christmas miracle that I have prayed for. And I'm excited, and he looks at me and he says, now you are considered in remission from Lyme. And there are many conflicting opinions over whether Lyme can come back or not. My practitioner believes that if you truly get rid of all of it and you're testing it with bioenergetics to make sure there's no trace left, then it's truly gone. But other practitioners don't believe that. And because I had read all that research, I was skeptical, and I was honestly a little worried. I was scared it would come back. So my practitioner said, let's test you every 6 months and let's monitor your progress. It has been 2.5 years. And I had my most recent bioenergetic scan about 3 weeks ago, and I am still free of Lyme disease. There is no evidence of Borrelia bacteria. I have lost 90 pounds since I started this journey. I can move my hands. I can button buttons. I can garden. I can do all the things I love again. And it's really thanks to, first of all, God, who healed me. I give him all the credit, but it's also thanks to alternative medicine. And I used that homeopathic protocol because that was what my practitioner gave me. But I know some of you are going to comment and you're going to say, I've tried homeopathy and it didn't do it. It wasn't enough. It didn't get rid of it, because I've had conversations with people who've experienced that. Well, I didn't just do homeopathy. I didn't just change my diet. I also included herbs. And this is where I think it made a difference. Now, this is totally my opinion and based on the many people I've talked to who've been through similar journeys. And I think the reason that I was able to completely get rid of Lyme, and the reason it has stayed gone for me and I've continued to improve in my health since then, is because of this dramatic love affair that I've had with herbs and the way they have just changed everything. So what I'd like to do with you is take you through a couple of my favorite herbs that I personally used to get well from Lyme and give you some suggestions for how to use those today. So the first herb that I relied on literally daily was turmeric. Now, turmeric is the best herb for inflammation. Honestly, if you struggle with any sort of chronic pain, you should be taking turmeric. That's not medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but I'm just telling you it made a difference for me. And as your friend, I suggest it. So turmeric is a special plant, but to get the full benefit, you need to take turmeric and black pepper at the same time. So I used a product called Turmeric for this. I actually didn't use my own homegrown turmeric because I used this Turmeric that had the combo of the black pepper and turmeric together. It's a liquid. It worked like nothing I had ever tried before to help with my joint pain. So that was the first thing I relied on. The second herb that I relied heavily on was white willow bark. Now, white willow bark has salicylic acid in it, which is great for pain relief. It's a compound studied by herbalists for many, many years. And for me, white willow bark taken as a tincture or infused into an oil and made into a salve was so helpful. And when you look at my Lyme disease protocol that I've linked for you, I'm going to link all of these things. If you don't have an herb garden and you're like, where do I even get this stuff? I've linked some things for you. But white willow bark is incredibly helpful for pain relief. Another plant that I relied heavily on was garlic. And this one might surprise you, but garlic is really good for the immune system. And if you remember, part of my problem was I was getting sick constantly. And so to try to get my body to a state of being healthy and not catching every cold and virus that came through, I started using garlic. And the way I did it is I took garlic cloves and I fermented them in honey. And so I have that recipe in that PDF for you if you want to try that too. And I would just eat a clove of that fermented garlic every day. And it made a big difference for me and for my immune system while I was going through the protocol. Another huge support for me was chamomile. Now, chamomile is an herb that's best known for helping with sleep or relaxation. But you might not know that chamomile is actually really good for calming racing thoughts. And so when you are detoxing from Lyme, it's very common to have neurological symptoms. If you research Lyme disease, it often affects people neurologically. And so for me, during that Lyme protocol, I had a little uptick in anxiety, and chamomile made a massive difference. I took it as tea, just a simple cup of chamomile tea, up to 3 times a day on days where I was feeling anxious, made a tremendous difference for me. So simple chamomile was a good friend. The next herb I used will come as no surprise to you, and that was lemon balm. And I've already told you a lot about lemon balm, but I mainly relied on lemon balm to calm down my nervous system, which was very fired up in the midst of all of this. And lemon balm was also the answer to my prayers for shingles, as I told you last week. So I used lemon balm every day during this protocol, and I continue to take lemon balm every single day. It's important, it keeps me feeling good, and so it's one that I never skip. Now, I had a weird kind of side effect happen as I was treating the Lyme. And I don't know if this was just a me thing. And if you've had Lyme, I would love for you to leave a comment and tell me if you experienced this. But I started having some hair loss. And I'm not just talking about like when you brush your hair and like you lose a little bit of hair in your brush. I have long hair. I've always been like that. I'm talking about washing your hair in the shower and you pull your hands down and there are handfuls of hair. That was scary for me, and herbs helped. And the herb that I reached for was rosemary. So I would take a rosemary tea and actually rinse my hair with it. I would infuse an oil with rosemary and rub that into my scalp like a serum and sleep with it overnight to kind of nourish my scalp. And that helped a tremendous amount with the hair loss. It really made a difference. And so if you have that weird little symptom, or maybe like if you just naturally have like thinning hair, give some rosemary a try. It really helped me, and it's one of my favorite herbs, and it's a great one to grow. It's very easy to grow. Another herb that I used was St. Johns Wort. And now this is one that I would not recommend that you use without first speaking with an herbalist or a doctor who understands herbs, because St. John's Wort can interact with some medications, including birth control. So make sure you talk to a doctor before you take this one. But St. John's Wort is really good for mental health things. In particular, if you struggle with depression, that is one to look into. And then I also used lavender, and my favorite way to use lavender is in the bath. I would use an infused lavender oil when I would take a bath, and I also would add Epsom salt for a boost of magnesium, which is really good anytime you're dealing with any kind of health thing. But because I had so much joint pain, those Epsom salt baths with lavender oil added, man, they made a huge difference. And not only did it force me to like slow down and rest to take that like Epsom salt bath every day, but it also kind of forced my nervous system to calm down. Just like the Lemon Balm was helping nervous system, I really think the Epsom salt baths made a difference for that too. So sometimes just something as simple as a little magnesium bath can make a big difference in how you feel. And then the final herb that I used regularly and that I still rely on today was Tulsi, or holy basil. And I'm not even going to tell you a lot about that herb, because that is going to be the herb we feature in video number 4 in the series of herbs that heal. We're going to deep dive on Tulsi. And you guys, we have quite a story for this one, because Tulsi not only helped me, it helped Josh, my husband, too. And I want him to come on and tell you a little bit about Tulsi. And if you have a husband or a boyfriend or a dad or a mom or an aunt or a family member and they're so skeptical of herbs, tune in to the next video, because Josh was that way too. He was skeptical of all of this, but he saw me start to get better, and then he began to use some herbs too, and he's going to tell you his story of how Tulsi helped him in particular. So take a few minutes today, grab that free protocol, and it will give you much more detail on this. But that's just an overview of some of the things I did to help me heal from Lyme. Herbs, homeopathics, detoxing. But the most important thing I did, if you hear nothing else, the most important thing I did is I prayed. And I got real honest before the Lord about how weak and spent I was feeling, because by the time I got diagnosed, I had been sick for so long, you guys. Like, I had all but given up hope. And I had to be at a point where I was willing to let Him take over and guide me to a path that would be different than what I would have chosen. Because I would have chosen to go to a doctor and get a pill and it'd be a quick fix and I feel better in 10 days. But that didn't happen for me. Instead, I went through this 11-month journey of using homeopathy, of using herbs, of having to literally cling to the Lord day by day with hope that there is going to be healing at the end of this journey, even if it doesn't look like it right now, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. He was my hope. He was my strength. He is who got me through it. And there were days where I just wanted to quit. I was so done. And I would go to him in prayer and I would say, Lord, please just give me what I need to get through this one day. Just get me through this 1 hour. Just get me through this one flare of pain, whether it be my hip or my ankle. Like, I just need you to sustain me because I don't have it left inside of me to do this. And he did. He was faithful. And that's the testimony I have for you today. He was faithful. Now, it wasn't a quick fix. There was no magic pill. It required me to make some changes. I had to change what I ate. I had to exercise. Like, I had to do the work. But when I was willing to do the work and do my part, he showed up and he did his part. And he healed me. And he used the plants to do it. So here's the thing. Once again, we come back to, we don't worship the herbs. We worship the God who created them, right? We don't worship the created. We worship the creator. And in my Lyme journey, herbs were absolutely like a shade tree on a hot summer day. They are where I found relief. But on the flip side, God was the one who sustained me. He was the one who healed me. So I'm not giving credit to the herbs for that. I'm giving credit to God for that. And I want to be real clear there. But I do want you to know that there is hope and there is healing possible. It just doesn't always look like a prescription bottle. Sometimes you have to do something out of the box to get well. So I hope this will encourage you. I hope that maybe you found a little glimpse of hope here. If nothing else, I hope it will kind of trigger you to research and to start looking at maybe some natural options you didn't consider before, whether it be herbs or whether it be homeopathics, or maybe you get a bioenergetic scan. Whatever that may be, grab the resource I've linked for you here today and start diving in, because you are worth it, friend. Don't give up. It's worth the fight. The good life on the other side is worth the work. So pursue it. Don't give up hope. Keep fighting. And remember, herbs are friends.